A few months ago, NPR did a story about how people put on racing clothes to ride their bike to work. I see that all the time. There's a BART.
In America, they do that.
Well, yeah, there's a BART train in America, and you see guys dressed up like racers. They ride 2 miles to the BART station, take their bike on BART, ride it 12 miles, then ride 4 blocks to work, and walk in looking like a dork. And it's really, it's common, and it's embarrassing, and it's, it's not the end of the world. It's not an evil thing, and maybe it's just a phase, but it certainly does. It's common. I'm sure it's all over the place. Am I the guy who came up with the sub 24.0 concept? Yeah, I invented that. All it is, my favorite kind of bicycle riding are what I call S240s, which is sub 24-hour overnights. And all it is I used to do a lot of camping, a lot of climbing, mountaineering, backcountry stuff, and I still love to do that, but I've got a family, I've got a business, but I live in an area surrounded by hills and open space. And so what I do, really frequently, I've done more than 100 of them now, is just load up the bike, pedal for as little as 40 minutes and as much as 3 hours, and throw the tent down, take out the food, and go out with some guys from work or some friends, and have a nice night out in the hills, and then just come back, and we're ready for work the next morning by the time it opens. And the idea is, and it talks a little bit about that in the book too, the sub 24-hour overnight. It's a wonderful way to use a bike, and the thing that I like about that is that it's different from a tour. When a bike tour is more about the pedaling and, I guess the pedaling, not the destination. But a bike overnight is more about just getting to the destination. It becomes clear that the best way to get there is by bike. It's way faster than walking, and you can't take a car there. So it's just like minimal effort bike camping, and it's a wonderful way to go. I can't say that we've ever camped in a legal spot, but we have always left it better than we found it. We always pick up garbage that we didn't put there. The question is, how do you explain this to a 16-year-old who's Cat 2 racer? No, absolutely give it up. There's another book out there. I don't know whether it's still in print, but it was in print 15, 20 years ago, and it's called The Geography of Childhood. And the premise of the book is that you can go to the Grand Canyon and watch the sunset, and if you're an old man or an old lady, you're going to be awestruck by the grandeur of it. And you bring your kids there, and they're going to be making bombs and forts in the dirt at your feet. And so, there's a time and a place for that. And that brings up another question, and I talk a little bit about this in the book too, is that if you are an adult cyclist and you do have teenage kids, well, the teenage years are years of establishing independence. Biologically they're ready to reproduce and go out, but mentally they aren't there yet. But they have to have their independence. And so if you push cycling on them like that, they're going to push back. If they just grow up with it, give it cycling, recreational cycling is basically for adults right now. I mean, it is for grown-ups. It's for when things are a little bit settled and you're in a better place for it. No teenage boy or girl wants to go out on a family ride for the wind in the hair, the exercise. It ain't going to happen. So I'd say, let it go. Let the kid be a racer.
Thank you.
Okay, the question is, was it my intention to write a book? That's an interesting question, and I don't want to talk up here forever because I know you probably have things to do, but the answer is pretty interesting too. The normal way to write a book is to get the bug that you want to write a book, and you write a book and you finish at least most of it, and then you submit it to publishers who tell you, no, send it to an agent. So you hire a book agent who does the shopping for you and looks around for a publisher, and the agent gets a 15% cut or something. In my case, it was actually really kind of neat because I was at work and the phone rang and it said Grant line 1, and I picked up and said, "Hi, this is Grant." And it was a guy named David Schiller who works for Workman Publishing. And he asked me if I would like to write a book. He said, "We'd like you to write a book." And I said, "How many words and how long do I have?" And he said, 50,000 words and you have a year. And I said, "Okay, I can do that. What do you want me to write about?" He said, "The kind of stuff that you write about." So after a year, I turned in my 50,000 words, and he, after about 4 days, he called me up. He said, "There's a good book in here somewhere." And then he said, "But you haven't written enough. Cover more topics. Don't worry about the word count. We'll give you another 6 months." And he suggested a lot of other topics: tandems, recumbents, family writing, things that I don't address in the book, and I got it up to 90,000 words. A typical novel, 70 to 80,000 words. So I made it this huge book, and it was a horrible book. It was just me blathering on about everything under the sun having to do with bicycles. So I sent it back to them. I said, "I don't like this book." And after 3 or 4 days, he said, "Nobody here likes it either." And I thought, crap, I'd already gotten most of my advance. I got a $25,000 advance, and I'd gotten 15,000 of that. And I thought, okay, well, I've been working on this it was almost 3 years at the time. And I didn't want to have to give back my advance. As it turns out, you generally don't have to give back your advance, but I didn't know that at the time, and the advance was already spent. So I said, well, look, let me just write about things that I actually care about and that I have something to contribute that hasn't been said before or said in this particular way. Nobody needs to hear me say that, well, if you ride a tandem with your wife, be sensitive to the bumps, and it requires cooperation, all that kind of stuff. Everybody knows that. So I cut it down to 34,000 words. Went from 50 to 90 to 34,000 words. And if you divide that by the days, 3 years, I think it works out to something like 32 to 33 words a day. So which makes me a pretty non-prolific writer, but I eventually got it done, and I'm happy with the book. So I ride one of our bikes. It's called an A Homer Hilson. And our bikes are generally not available in bike shops, and I'll tell you a really quick story about the name of the bike. I wanted to name it the Honus Wagner. Raise your hand if you know who Honus Wagner is. He's a baseball player. He's a Pittsburgh Pirate around the turn of the century, early 1900s, and I like the name Honus Wagner. I think that's like the manliest name out there, and I like Honus Wagner as a baseball player, and I have a baseball history. I like baseball. And so it turns out the nieces of Honus Wagner are his only heirs, and they have a law firm licensing the rights to the name Honus Wagner. And the same law firm licenses the name of Marilyn Monroe, Michael Jackson, Joe DiMaggio, things like that, and Honus Wagner. So usually they just sell coffee mugs and bobbleheads and things like that, and they're really cheap trinkets, and we were going to sell this like multi-$1,000 frame or bicycle. And so I said, well, can we give you less than a 10% commission on it? And they agreed to 5%. And then when it came down to signing the contract, they got greedy and they wanted 10. And I said, screw it, I'm not going to do this. And then they backed off and said, okay, we'll take the 5. And I said, too late, we're going to make up our own name. And so that's how A. Homer Hilson came to be the name. I was going to name it Homer Brown. I just like these people names, but there's a football player named Homer Brown, and when there's a football player, there may be some descendants, maybe some family. So I didn't want to have anything to do with that. The question is, when you do a 24-hour tour, camping in the hills, do I take a bob trailer or anything like that? No, but the thing about the 24-hour tour is that you can go overboard. I've taken 55 pounds at most on one of these 24-hour overnights. That was like 2 tents and a lot of food and a lot of cooking gear. I was taking like more than my share for someone who couldn't carry a lot. But I've also gone as little as about 12 pounds on it. So the great thing about doing these for overnight is that if you're packing for a tour, you want to make sure that you've got all the stuff that you're ever going to need, because you don't want to be 3 or 4 days or a week out there with too much stuff or with not enough. And these overnights, it just doesn't matter. You can be a slob, you can guess, you can throw things together. I have forgotten sleeping bags before, and I just slept in a tent. It just doesn't matter. You're going to survive. It's only overnight. Suffer a little bit for your stupidity, if you forget to bring something. So that's why I like them. Oh yeah, yes. The question is that on the cover of the book, what's it say? Equipment, health, safety, and attitude. Well, I kind of have a bad attitude about a lot of things that are happening with bicycles. And one of the attitude that's probably referring to is just don't be, and this is an important point, thank you for the question, don't use the bicycle as a piece of personal fitness equipment. Don't rely on the bike to help you whip yourself into shape. Don't have, that attitude. Use it just as a useful get-around town thing. Use it for longer, pleasurable rides. Just don't be obsessed with getting healthy and fit and losing weight on the bicycles. That's sort of what it is. Well, thank you all for coming. There are some books over here. If you haven't bought one, I'll be happy to sign it. And here's another little trivia thing. Just this is a generalization, but it's pretty true. On paperbacks, the author makes about 8% of the cover price on books wholesaled. So, I'm never going to get rich off this book. I don't plan on it. I have a regular job. I'm doing okay anyway. But, a lot of people are afraid to ask, how much money do you make on this book? And I just wanted to throw that out. And typical, 8% of the cover price is my cut. So I get like $1.15. So no big deal. So, I am more concerned that the bookstore who ordered a whole bunch of these does well on the books, so they don't have to send them back and so they don't regret having bought them. So.